Hi there, it's Archie. I'm back for the ADHD Care Podcast. Quite excited about today's episode, actually. We have a special guest who is based over in the US. We've been trying to get this special guest for quite some time, and I'm pleased to say that we managed to set some time and bring them on. So we have Dr. Edward Hallowell, aka Dr. Ned Hallowell, who is a board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist, also a world-renowned ADHD expert, and the New York Times best-selling author of over 20 books on psychological topics, including the all-important groundbreaking book that he published a few years back, which is called Driven to Destruction, which he co-authored alongside Dr. John Ratey, which has fundamentally changed how ADHD is understood. Dr. Hallowell is also the founder of the Hallowell Centers in the US and dedicated his career destigmatizing ADHD and showcasing his strengths. So without wasting much time, let's bring Dr. Ned Hallowell on. Nice to meet you, Dr. Hallowell. So honored to have you on our podcast today. This has been something that we've been kind of excited about to bring you on for quite some time. So really appreciate that you've taken some time to sit down with us and discuss these fascinating subjects on ADHD. First thing I just wanted to just ask you really was, what was it that first drew you to kind of specialize in ADHD? Was it a personal connection? Was it a patient?
I was finishing my training. First I did adult psychiatry, and then you have to do something after that, sort of elective time. And I literally had no clue what I wanted to do. So I said, well, child psychiatry sounds interesting. So I committed, like signing up for the Army, for 2 more years of training in child psychiatry. And as luck would have it, or the good Lord above, the first lecture was on a condition I'd never heard of, called attention deficit disorder. And it was 1981, I remember as if it were yesterday. And as this Dr. Elsie Freeman, as she proceeded to talk about ADD, as it was called then, I had maybe the biggest aha moment I've ever had. I said, that's me. And more than that, this medical model leaves out all the good parts. And that changed my life. That 15-second revelation, and I've been living off of it ever since, trying to, explain to the world about how fascinating this condition is. It is both a gift and a curse, and my job is to maximize the gift part and minimize the curse part. And I've been doing that since 1981 when I learned about this condition.
Wow, it's over 40 years ago. So it's been quite a long journey.
Yeah.
So when you say you could resonate with what you were sort of reading about ADHD, did you then subsequently kind of seek a diagnosis for yourself then?
Well, I made the diagnosis by listening to the talk. I didn't need to go. I didn't need to have somebody who knew less than I did to tell me I had it. I knew I had it.
Right.
And I knew it better than anyone who could have told me that I had it. I mean, I basically created, the strength-based model. The textbooks didn't mention anything about strengths. And some of the respected experts scoffed at me for saying there was anything good about it at all. In fact, Russ Barkley, whom I dearly respect, flat out denied it, said there's nothing good about this condition, nothing. And, I think he would retract his words now, because there are so many people who are so gifted, Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, self-made billionaires. The fact is, most entrepreneurs have it.
Yeah.
And wherever you find highly talented people, entrepreneurial, creative, artistic, you'll find a big lot of ADD. Now, I still call it ADD because that's what it was called when I learned it. ADHD, as it's called now, is bullshit, and pardon my language. It's wrong. I have the condition. I don't have a deficit of attention. I have an abundance of attention. All of us with ADD have that. Our challenge is to control it, not to generate it. We've got more than we know what to do with. It's what we have trouble with is directing it where we want it to go. It goes off in many directions simultaneously, and that hurts us.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to control it. But a deficit, that's absurd. If it were a deficit, it would be a form of dementia. which it is not. I'm not. I may be many things, but demented, I'm not.
Which
And,
which fits into my next question actually. So you've introduced the term VAST, which is VAST, as an alternative to ADHD. So what was it that motivated you to redefine ADHD as VAST?
well, because first of all, the term that we were given was bullshit. Was wrong. And I think it's bad. It's bad enough to have it be misleading, but to have it be flat out wrong, something needs to be done about that. So it was at the suggestion of someone in one of my lectures. She said, what about VAST? And I said, what's VAST? She said, well, first of all, the condition itself is vast, which is true. It takes in far more than most people realize. It's not just a matter of doing your homework. And what the VAST stands for, variable attention stimulus trait. And this condition is highly variable, never the same from minute to minute. Stimulus and attention are the two key elements, varying attention, varying stimulation, and then trait to distinguish it from a disorder. It's like being left-handed. It's a trait, not a disorder. So the goal is to turn VAST into something that benefits you more than hurts you, and that's not hard to do if you know what's going on.
Do you believe that because of the term ADHD, it's quite misleading, and there's a lot of people that obviously are not coming forward or seeking a diagnosis because when they read the term, one, they see it as negative, and two, it doesn't actually describe their struggles and their challenges.
Right, exactly. They're afraid of the stigma, and the stigma, the stigma used to be extreme. I mean, I've been on national TV saying I have this condition, and I've had colleagues say, "Oh, you don't want to tell people that." Well, now it's getting, which it pleases me no end, it's getting to the point where people will brag about having. Well, I must be super creative. I must be a perfect entrepreneur. I've got, after all, ADHD, and I want them to start saying I've got VAST. But we've come a long way since 1981, a long way. Which is great. It used to be, people literally were ashamed of it. And kids in school, adults, and I'm afraid I still have to tell adults in the workplace, don't tell people you have it, because they'll think it means you're unreliable and that you're a little bit wacko. And it's just, it's not fair, but it's the case.
The word disorder, and I completely understand and I agree with you on that, it's quite misleading, it's quite negative, there's a lot of stigma with that. But obviously if you look at general psychiatry, a lot of conditions are labelled as disorder, anxiety disorder, yes. Depression. So it would be actually quite hard to redefine ADHD, not redefine all the other conditions as well.
That's not my, I don't have the muscle power to do that. I want to explain to people what it really is, but far be it for me to try to have it renamed. That won't happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and and I think, and I like the word VAST, and I've read your books, and you mentioned it, and I've heard you on different kind of platforms talking about it. So I think it's much more refreshing to hear something that's not just a negativity surrounding it with the word ADHD. You touched on something earlier I wanted to revisit. You mentioned about the strength-based approach, so which obviously emphasizes on leveraging the strengths of the individual that has ADHD. Would you mind just sharing some of the strategies or success stories that you've focusing on strengths and transformative outcomes?
Sure. Everyone's familiar with the problematic side, the problem with executive function, the problem with time management, the problem with multitasking, the problem with the main problem of sustaining attention. The other side of the coin is the side that in fact is far more important. The negatives we can deal with, we can control those, but the upside you can't buy and you can't teach. Right at the top of the list is imagination. That's what separates us from the rest more than anything else. Our imagination is huge. We're usually not aware of that because we've always had it. We think everyone is like that. We don't realize how boring and unimaginative a lot of people are because we've always had this huge gold mine up there. Now the problem is, as much as our imagination can deliver, all kinds of treasures, it also can deliver misery. We can dream up all the negative things that could possibly happen. So it's a mixed bag having such a fertile imagination. And so part of trying to grow into this condition and turn it into an asset is learning how to squelch the negative stuff that comes out of our imagination. I mean, we imagine rejection. This rejection sensitivity. We imagine rejection. We imagine failure. We imagine that we're never going to make it. All these negative gloom and doom states that we go into so easily. Well, that we need to get on top of that and own it, run it, manage it, so it doesn't manage us. The upside is imagination, creativity, originality, ability to think outside the box, visionary, dreamer, entrepreneur, discoverer, inventor. Those are all the strengths that go with ADD. Also, we tend to be very generous, very forgiving. We can also be very harsh and judgmental, which is, problem sometimes. We are very forgiving. We can't remember a grudge long enough to hold one. I mean, and our great goal is to create progress and harmony and growth and strength and build on the good. Don't dig down into the negative. Some people jokingly call me Pollyanna and Russ Barkley Darth Vader, because we both represent the negative and the positive of this condition. Both are right. He's right and I'm right. It's just a matter of which do we want to emphasize, the things that could go wrong or the things that could go right.
Yeah, the whole concept around negative perceptions of ADHD stems from, obviously, I'm sure with childhood. If you're being told you can't do this, you're being told off, you're getting in trouble because of what we know, in the case of ADHD, can also inform your core beliefs. You start to internalize it, don't you? So I agree. I think it's about trying to reframe that. But I suppose if you have a whole childhood and life of that negativity, it is actually difficult to actually stop and think about the positives. And us as parents, because I've got a son with ADHD as well, you can't help yourself to go down the negative route and not think about the positives. So, yeah.
It's an important point in there. For some reason, and we can speculate as to what it is, the negative is far more gripping than the positive. Pain is more, grabs your attention more quickly than pleasure. I mean, we love pleasure too, but and that's why we often hyper focus on these very negative states, because it grabs our attention and holds on to it and won't let go. And and I talk about the default mode network. You get into that web, and it's very hard to get out. Medication won't release you, but what will is a skill that you can learn, which is how to change the channel, how to switch out of the grip of the negative. And what you have to do is come up with some other stimulus that's equally positive that pulls you out of the negative. For some people, it's vigorous exercise. For someone else, it's loud music. For someone else, it's having a creative outlet, bake a cake, or for me, write a book. But it's got to be stimulating enough to pull you away from the high stimulation of the pain, the negative.
In the book that you're obviously well renowned for is Driven to Destruction, in amongst all the other books you've written. So looking back, what do you think that book resonates with a lot of people? What was it that was in there that made it stand out compared to other publications?
Well, it's what I put in the first sentence of the book. When you understand this, you'll see it everywhere. I was describing something that's very common that nobody'd heard of. It'd be as if you never heard of an orange, and then you finally discover an orange. You say, "Man, this is cool!" And not only that, it's good for you. And the next thing you know, you're swimming in oranges. Well, ADD was nobody'd heard of it, and turns out it's way common, much more common, I think, than the textbooks have it. They just measure the people who are languishing who have it. One of the diagnostic criteria is you have to be languishing. You have to be impaired. And if you include everybody, who are doing well, then you've got a lot of people, particularly in this country, where our gene pool is loaded for it. We were discovered and colonized by people who were discoverers, who were creators, who were inventors, who were entrepreneurs, who were rebels, who were, fomented a revolution to gain our independence. And that's another thing. We're fiercely independent. We hate to be told what to do. Hate it, tell us to do something, we'll do the opposite. We're born contrarians, but that doesn't mean we're always negative. We're the greatest teammates in the world if we believe in the cause. And that's another thing. We're very mission driven. Give us a cause that we believe in, we'll win the revolution. We overthrew the King of England, or Queen of whichever, or the King of England, most powerful man in the world back then. We kicked his ass, with our little muskets and because we had a cause that we believed in. And although you read about our early forefathers and mothers, they were all ADD types. They were all passionate, cause-driven, articulate, rabble-rousing rebels. And we got our independence, and we've been building on it ever since. So it's a great story, the story of this country. And I was an English major in college, so I'm a big fan of your literature over there. Britain, I think Britain it gave the two great gifts to the world that Britain gave: number one, Parliament, and number two, English literature. The greatest literature in the world. Shakespeare is unsurpassed in any language in terms of what he was able to create. And then there's a whole string in his wake. Milton is called the second English poet, and then there's a whole bunch of others. But the English language is the finest instrument in the world. I play it every day, and I'm still trying to learn how to play it. But and then Parliament, which begat, our system. As long as we don't destroy it, it's fantastic. We're in a hard time right now because we have some very how should I put it? Different thinking people who are putting our democracy at risk, but then again, it's always been at risk. Benjamin Franklin said that. If you don't tend to it, you'll ruin it. It's a system because it admits everybody. Everybody has a voice. When everybody has a voice, you're always on the brink of chaos. And all it takes is one or two very charismatic voices to lead you into very dangerous territory. And right now, the charismatic voice is saying, it's sticking up for the person who feels deprived. And in any large group, that's the majority. It doesn't have everything they want. Well, then you tell them, well, you should have it, and you're being deprived, you're being oppressed, and the people who aren't letting you have it are taking advantage of you, when none of that's true. But you make them believe it's true, and then suddenly their deprivation becomes a righteous cause. And there you've got our situation today.
Yeah.
I think it'll work out because, it's the best system in the world, and people are inherently, I think, good. But now it's just encouraging everybody's most selfish motives and most racist motives and most, separatist motives, and it's ripping us apart. Now, has it ruined us? No, and I don't think it will. But there's always that potential. Whenever you walk up to the edge of a cliff, there's always a chance you'll fall off. And we're getting close to the edge of that cliff. You've been in this field for years. How do you think the perception has changed in terms of understanding ADHD throughout that course? And if you think about the research and where we are now, do you want to start maybe just... When I learned about it, it was considered a disability. And a bad disability. People would never come out and say that. More than a few moms said to me, I feel like my son has leukemia or cancer, after getting the diagnosis. So it was misunderstood. It was negatively presented. There was nothing good about it. And it was enshrouded in ignorance. And the condition itself was real, but people just didn't understand it. They didn't understand the beauty of it and the power of it. They understood the destructive force it can exert, And unfortunately, that's all the teachers knew too. These teachers, their goal that they wanted in the classroom was order. They wanted kids to shut up and sit still. And people with ADD can't do that. So they were judged as being disobedient. Well, in many schools, the treatment for that was to be physically punished, spanked, whipped, what have you, or segregated, put in the corner, put out of the room, and in that process be labeled as bad. The diagnosis was a moral diagnosis. You were bad, and then if you add in religion, you had the devil in you. So the treatment for that was to beat the devil out of the child, and that there you have it. Hundreds of years, the summation of mental health, the so-called, was all about the devil and beating the devil out and possession by the devil, and the goal was to be quiet and not disruptive. Well, that's not how progress is not a quiet process. And, disruptive people serve the group, and the quiet ones who say nothing, they could be the quiet little genius, but more often than not, they don't have much to say. They don't have much to offer. They don't have many new ideas. And so they, behave their way along to a lackluster life.
I want to ask you, moving into when we look at I'm involved in assessments and diagnosis as well. The whole kind of field of masking. I'm sure you've heard of people saying, "Oh yeah, my child is masking the symptoms in the school environment." Yet, at home, the caregivers' parents are noticing more of the traits. Is there such a thing called masking? Particularly as we know with ADHD, there is consistency. We expect to see traits that are pervasive and across multiple settings. Can one mask their symptom in a particular environment?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word masking. I'd just say being polite. When you get into a larger environment, you don't say "fuck you." You suppress that. You get at home, that's what you say to your brother or what have you. So. Masking is too formal a word. I mean, being polite, suppressing your rude tendency, suppressing your primitive feelings, primitive actions. That's what socialization means. You learn how to inhibit. You learn how to inhibit what you'd like to say, like to do, and then you get to an environment where you're comfortable, namely at home, and you let loose. I think. If I were to use the term masking, it would probably be along the lines of developing a false self or an imposter syndrome, where you don't think you can be your real self anywhere, not just at school and at home, but everywhere you go, you feel like you have to put on as T.S. Eliot said, put on a face to meet the faces that you meet, and if that face is not the real you. Well, that's a terrible drama. That's a very isolating, lonely place to live. A lot of people do live there, where they are so alone, they can never be real. Even looking in the mirror, it's hard for them to be real. And in fact, one of the exercises I have in the book I'm working on right now is to stand in front of a mirror and talk to yourself. Describe yourself to yourself to see what is the real self, what comes out. Is there a consistent theme to it? And one way to find that out is to just talk to yourself in the mirror. It's a wonderful thing to do, because you can then discover your real self. Another way to do it is to ask other people who know you well. But remember, if you have a false self, and if you're in the imposter category, you've been faking it for them too. So, you haven't shown your real self to anyone, including yourself. Rare is the person who really knows his true or her true self. And is there such a thing as a true self? I mean, that's another question. I mean, everyone modifies their behavior according to who they're with and where they are. Well, did you modify it so there's no such thing as a true self? I mean, I think what you do, we can say there is a true self, but it's more like the summation of many other different selves. So that one doesn't come through. And if one does come true, it's more likely an extreme version. The extreme person gets recognized, because for most of us, we're flexible enough that we modify our behavior according to our surroundings. And well, we should. you know.
Would that not then obviously cause challenges? And this is talking from experience as well for us physicians, clinicians, when we are relying on these rating scales and feedback and the guidelines.
I hate the rating scales. I hate them. What happens is nobody sits down and talks to the kid. They're all getting all these checklists. I can't stand them. If you want to get to know somebody, talk to someone else who knows them. What I asked teachers to do, I said, don't fill out a checklist. Write me a paragraph. What is Johnny like? I don't care whether it's what he's like in the bathroom. What is he like? You know, what comes to mind when you think of Johnny or Sally? That's the best test. Well, the best test is sitting down and talking to them or talking to other people who know them. But short of that, because that's kind of cumbersome, just give me a paragraph, just sentences, not checklists, and describe the kid to me or describe the adult to me. And that's, you know, takes a little bit longer, and it's not as computer friendly because it's not just ticks in a box score, but it's much closer to the truth. I mean, we can't be reduced to such small quantities. We just can't. And trying to do that reduces who we are. You know, it eviscerates our truth and turns us into checklist quote, you know, little notches in a box. And we're much bigger than that. We're much more varied than that. We are inconsistent. And the condition ADD is in itself consistently inconsistent. We're not the same person from hour to hour, even minute to minute. You know, we have all these various forces swirling around us. And which one predominates, it doesn't stay predominant for too long.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it very interesting. People who like certainty hate that because we've got one foot on a bar of soap and the other foot on a banana peel. You know, we're sliding around, and so you just can't pin us down. You know, it's like Matthew Arnold said of Shakespeare: "Shakespeare, thou art free." And what he was saying is, you just can't pin him down. You can't just sum him up in one essay, or, you know, unless the essay is all about freedom and variety and inconsistency.
But when, you know, like for us in the UK, I'm sure you're familiar with the guidelines that we have here. When you are, you know, the research and the guidelines and the powers that be actually advocate for us to use rating scales, and and I've seen so many cases where a young person has been referred, they didn't score on a Connors rating scale, for example, and yet they were actually showing the signs. If you, as you say, speak to the teachers or get more of a narrative feedback from an informant. How do we get past that? Certainly, for anyone new who's coming to the ADHD field as well, because everyone seems to be jumping on the rating scales bandwagon, which is rightfully so. That's how we were trained. That's how psychiatry work. You have to use the questionnaire, use the rating scale.
Well, you do what I do. You say, okay, I'll use it because it has useful information, but I'm not going to hang my hat on it. I'm going to have other sources. Most important, narrative interview. Sit down and talk to the child, the parent, the teacher, the janitor. You know, narrative history is the best test we've got. Much better than the rating scales, by the way. The rating scales give this illusion of objectivity, which they aren't. They're filled out by subjective people. You know, and so they are absolutely subjective, but they present an illusion because it's a number and a data point and it's computer friendly. They give you the illusion of certainty, which is simply wrong. The truth, which is harder to get at, and it's not a truth, it's many truths, is embedded in the history as taken from several sources, and probably at several different times, you know, of the year. You run up against the problem of how practical is that, and you know, at some point you have to say, okay, we'll settle for what we've got. But I wouldn't settle with questionnaires because they're so reductive, and they miss so much. And you know, and people, whoever developed the checklist has a vested interest in proving, you know. So there's a confirmation bias in what they've done to validate their test. I mean, anybody who knows people knows there's inconsistency built in. Now, that's not to say you can't say, well, this person is predominantly shy, and this person is predominantly gregarious, and this person is predominantly an asshole. I mean, you know, there are themes that run through, you know, whoever you are. I'm not saying disregard those themes, but just realize that all of them can be broken down into component parts that are not consistent person to person.
How about objective testing, things like continuous performance test and QB test and those kind of new technologies that's coming into the field?
Those are great. I mean, the CPT has been around for a long time, and all it means, by the way, if you're listening, you don't know, it's a fancy way of playing what in this country is called Simon Says. I don't know if you have it over there, but you're standing in a group of people, and there's a leader called Simon, and Simon says, all right, Simon says run, so everybody runs. And then he says, run. And if you run, you didn't hear Simon Says, so you're penalized. In other words, you act before you have time to think and inhibit. That's the CPT right there in a nutshell. It's a game of Simon Says. And if you're able to listen and inhibit, then you don't have ADD. And if you're not able to do that, then you have ADD. And that's it. People make it sound so much more complex. It's not. It's, are you able on the spur of the moment to inhibit or not? Another version of that is the test where you see a red dot and you're asked to spell the color. So when you see the red dot, instead of saying red, you're supposed to spell RED, and that also involves inhibiting. And so there are ways of challenging your desire to inhibit, and if you can't do it, then you have ADD. But what it doesn't assess, all of these, they in no way do they assess the creativity. Whoever invented that test was one creative guy or gal. These tests don't get at that. They should add to it. Can you think of a better way of assessing this problem? And then you'd get a whole bunch of wonderful stuff coming from the ADD crew. And then built into these tests is something else that doesn't get mentioned. They're boring. So once you get the system and you get bored of it, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And it's just because you've given up. This is boring. I'm going to get through it as fast as I can. I'll check B with every answer. And it's very hard to control for that.
Yeah. So they do have a place, obviously, and they're not diagnostic. They can be used in conjunction.
The only thing that does not have a place in the work with this condition is ridicule, shaming, putting people down. And that used to be the central part of it. These kids were ridiculed routinely as a way of quote unquote motivating them. Well, there's no place for that. And teachers who do that should be fired because the real disability, and I have both ADD and dyslexia, I wouldn't trade them for the world, but the real disability is shame and fear and believing you're inferior. That's what holds someone back in their lifetime. That's what keeps them from realizing their dreams. That's what keeps them from letting their full power come out because they're afraid. They're afraid. They don't want to look stupid, and they've been humiliated one too many times. And so they put all their effort into not taking any chances. Well, you're not going to do anything new and interesting if you never take chances.
In your book, ADHD 2.0, you discuss about the new science and strategies for thriving with ADHD. What are some of these groundbreaking findings and recommendations from this work?
It depends how you want to. I mean, what's new is some of the new things are the treatments of, for example, using balance as a therapeutic tool, challenging the cerebellum, a part of the brain at the back that we now realize, yes, it's in control of balance, but it's also connected to the centers of your brain that regulate cognition and mood. So interestingly enough, if you do the series of these exercises that challenge balance, standing on a wobble board, standing on one leg with your eyes closed, interestingly enough, if you do that, not only does your balance improve, but your cognition improves, your impulse control improves, your mood improves. And it sounds fishy. How could balancing do that? Well, it does. And that's the complexity of the brain. It's all overdetermined. It's all interconnected and interrelated. This most amazing apparatus in all of nature is the human brain. And we only understand a bit of it, but it's there. And it's how many trillion neurons and how many trillion synapses? It's just mind-boggling, what's going on up there. And so we tend to come to understand it bit by bit. Well, the recent bit is this role of balance that we thought had, when I was in medical school, it had nothing to do with cognition. Well, now we know it has a lot to do with cognition and impulse control and mood. So that one. And then the other one that is relatively new is the phenomenal power of exercise. My buddy John Rady wrote a book called Spark, The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain. And it shows the many different ways in which physical exercise benefits you, not just physically, but cognitively, emotionally. I tease John sometimes. I say, John, this is a great book. I can sum it up in one sentence. Exercise is good for your brain. But he breaks that down to many more specifics than that. But it's true. Never deny a kid recess. Never deny yourself exercise, because it's not just good for your, cardiovascular system and your muscular system. It's good for your emotional cognitive system.
I was watching I was on your social media on Instagram the other day, and you put out something, a quick video about parent and teacher relationships. It captured me, and I thought this would be quite good for you to maybe just explain it to our listeners here. So how can parents and caregivers create that more positive collaborative relationship with their child's teacher? So if the child has ADHD in this case, because often this is something that comes up all the time, that my child doesn't, my child's teacher doesn't understand my child, and you end up having this battle where parent has all these expectations for the teacher to make accommodations and put this in place, or learn more of the latest research, some of it that we're talking about here, or even listen to to the podcast and things. How can that relationship be improved between parents and teachers?
Let's say you had a neighbor who was complaining that you let your grass grow too tall. And how would you handle that? Would you fight with the neighbor? Would you call in the police? Would you call in the regulatory agency? No. If you were smart, you'd make friends with the neighbor. And the next thing you know, you can collaborate. It all comes back to that, what mental health professionals call an alliance. But it just you want to meet the person on friendly grounds. Don't lead with an insult or a demand or a lawsuit. Just say, "Come on, buddy, let's have a beer together, or let's have a meal together, or let's talk about the relative merits of long grass versus short grass." Laugh about it. Humor is a great one. Finding where is your common interest. Where is your common enemy? The pests that ruin lawns or what have you. It always comes back to that. Make friends with the person first. Don't lead with a series of demands, because your common interests are much greater than your divisory interests.
Well said. Yeah, and I'm a victim of this as well. I think sometimes when we go in, like for me as a physician, I usually tend to go in there as I know it all. All right, okay, you need to listen to me. But sometimes it's taking a step back and just, as you say, just go in with a gentle approach. Let's try and work together to try and support our child and completely understand.
There's a lot to be said for humility. I remember way back when the Watergate hearings were going on, there was a senator who was a member of the panel. His name was Sam Ervin. He was from North Carolina. And he would always begin, he'd say, "Well, I'm just an old country lawyer. I don't really know much about this stuff, but would you please tell me, sir?" And then he'd lead with this, very, very potentially hostile question. But he always prefaced it by saying he didn't know anything. And, and very disarming that way. And his humility and even if it was fake, was absolutely disarming. As opposed to this person who comes on like, they know everything and they've got the sword of truth in their hand. And there's a great little prayer that I love. It says, "Lord, help me always to search for the truth, but spare me the company of those who have found it." The people who think they've got the corner on truth are the ones who cause the most trouble.
I think when you think about high school, when your young person has so many teachers, and teachers are busy generally, chances are to actually get the time to actually foster that relationship that we're describing can be challenging, as you know, to even track them down to actually get them to agree to have a sit down or that conversation. It can be tough, as you were saying earlier, in terms of like how young people sometimes, because of their ADHD, it's so inconsistent that in one lesson they could be doing so well, in another lesson they could be struggling. So I think that's probably some parents will be sitting there going, I have been trying to reach out to the school, and they're not really welcoming. What would you be advised?
True. And I'll tell you why they're not welcoming, because they're besieged. For every one of you parent, there's another 35 that also want their attention. And so you really, it's hard to do, but put aside your own impatience, put aside your own irritability, if you possibly can. You just suck it up, swallow it back. If it means swallowing your pride, if it means allowing yourself to be insulted, allow it. It's in the name of your child. Don't get defensive. Don't attack. And praise. I mean, these teachers have a really hard job. They're overworked and underpaid, guaranteed, unless they work in Finland, where they're well paid and valued, and that's why they have the best educational system in the world. They really pay their teachers well and value them and respect them. Over there, being a teacher is as prestigious as being a doctor, if not more so. We don't give our teachers money or respect, and so you want to try to make up for that in your own small way if you can.
Moving on to sort of talking about clinical practice, really. So, what do you think is missing in the current ADHD's clinical care models, and what can clinicians do to improve outcomes?
Time and knowledge. Time and knowledge. That's what's missing. There aren't many clinicians who know it well enough to understand just the discussion we've been having. They're stuck in the old model: on, off, yes, no, medicate, not medicate, and that's their barrel of tricks is medication. That's it. And really, the first tool ought to be understanding, knowledge. Learn what it is and what it isn't, and learn what the child's version of it is and the parent's version of it. This is a complex ball of wax. It's not just a checklist. So not to push my own books, but my books are a good place to start, because I certainly understand this thing, and I describe it in a way that it doesn't oversimplify, but nor does it unnecessarily obfuscate. This is a condition that everyone can understand. The first line of my book, Driven Distraction, is once you understand this condition, you'll see it everywhere. It's way more common than the numbers would have you believe. So knowledge is where to start with, and an alliance with the people you're working with. And then in there, you build in non-medication factors treatments, medication factors treatments, other forces at work that that may be peculiar to your particular place and time. And then follow up. You can't do it all in one session. This condition doesn't go away over the course of your lifetime. I've still got it, believe me. I'm 75 years old. It's not going to go away. I've learned how to manage it a lot better than when I first learned about it 40 years ago. But it still bites me in the butt sometimes, and I still speak out when I shouldn't, and I still forget things that I wish I hadn't, and I still show up late, and you just can't wash that out completely. But you can reduce the stain, you can reduce the damage it does, but you're never going to, and you don't want to get rid of it, because if you got rid of all of it, you'd get rid of the good stuff too. So you want to learn how to promote and preserve the good stuff and inhibit and reduce the negative stuff.
I just want to touch on technology. Today's digital age, how do you perceive the impact of technology and the constant connectivity of individuals with ADHD, and what coping strategies would you recommend?
Well, everything about technology is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's the greatest advance of our time. It defines our era. It makes us unique. Never before in human history have we had technology that was anywhere close to what we have today. But at the same time, never, because it's so new to us, we don't really know how to use it. And if we're not careful, it uses us. So we get addicted to it. We spend too much time with it. We use it for pleasure. We use it for cheating. We use it for shortcutting. We shortchange ourselves in how we use it. So it's very much a maiden voyage. We're learning how to get this technology to serve us, and my God, does it ever. But at the same time, not shortchange us, not addict us, not make it so we can't have a human like right now. We're having an actual human conversation This is rare. People go through a whole day and not have a conversation that lasts more than 30 seconds. However long it takes to order a hamburger. And that's not very long. And even that, they'll order that online. So what I call the human moment. You want to preserve the human moment. What we're doing is human interaction. If we were in person, it'd be even better. But versus the electronic moment where there's no words exchanged, it's just keystrokes. And what that does, that takes out whatever is between the lines, whatever is, there's a great line in one of Keats' poems, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter still. And the essence of human communication is the unheard melody. What is happening between you and me right now? Unheard, beneath the words. There is a melody there, and if we can tune into that, that's pay dirt. I mean, that's when you really get on the beam together, when you're listening to each other's unheard melodies. That takes some time, though.
Nowadays we have AI, artificial intelligence as well. That's coming into the scene. Speaking of technology, and it's again gift and a curse.
Yeah.
Do you use it? Do you advocate for it, particularly for neurodiverse individuals?
Yeah, I'm a ardent advocate of it. I believe in it, want it, extol it, recommend it, tout it, but I have no idea how to use it. I use it to ask a question or something, the simple-minded use of it. It's way beyond me. I'm a student of it. I'm trying to learn, and I'm looking for good teachers because it's the way of the future. There's no doubt about that. You don't be a Luddite and say, "Oh, I don't believe in it." And it's going to pass you by if you're not careful. So I'm trying to catch up, and I'm humble enough to know what I don't know, which is most of it, and I turn to people who do know. But I'm also careful not to shake my head and say, "Oh, this is the work of the devil." And the way people greet anything new is to disparage it. Well, that's not helpful, or to limit it. People are always trying to put limits on new knowledge. You can't put limits on new knowledge. You can't put the tube back in the toothpaste. What the challenge is to learn how to use it for good and not for ill. And that's always a challenge, nuclear weapons versus nuclear power, there's always a good way to use a new technology and a destructive way to use it. And human nature being what it is, will find both. And then what we hope is that there's a part of us that will override the destructive part. And that's the story of human history right there in a nutshell. How do you make the good triumph over evil? And, whether you believe in good and evil or not, I mean, I don't know how you could not. It's so obvious. There's some things that are good and some things that are evil. In my books, I don't use the term God anymore, even though I'm an Episcopalian, which you over there would call an Anglican. I also know what I don't know, which is I don't know the answers to the big questions. So my quote about help me always to search for the truth, but spare me the company of those who think they found it. And then what I use instead of the word God, I made up the term invisible forces, because everybody has to believe in invisible forces. Gravity is an invisible force. Electricity is an invisible force. Love is an invisible force. So, we all can agree there are invisible forces. What to do with them is another question, but it would be foolish to deny that they exist because we subsist on them. Whether there is a force that called God, I think there is a power, an invisible force that works for good, but I also think there's an invisible force that works for evil and destruction. And I think they're in perpetual battle with one another. Now, how do you influence the outcome? Well, you try to do what's right. It's the simple answer to that. And do you fail? Yes, we all fail. We are very fallible as humans. The fact is, we are tempted by the devil or by whatever you want to call that invisible force. And sometimes we give in, we succumb. We do bad stuff. I've done many bad things in my life, things that I wish I hadn't done. And the best I can do to make up for it is to admit that I did it and to move on and try not to do it again. And I think the refreshing part of that is, so we acknowledge that we're fallible. We've acknowledged that we've made mistakes. we express our hope that we can do better, but we don't judge ourselves as subhuman if we err, because we're going to err, and that doesn't make us the devil. It means that we're susceptible to the temptations of evil, if you will. If you don't like that word, temptations of what's destructive, or temptations of what won't produce a good outcome. You find common ground in the vocabulary you use. But now I hope people listening to this, I hope this has made sense to them. We've roamed far and wide.
Yeah, we have actually. I was actually going to ask you the last question in terms of future projects at all. If there's anything that you're working on currently, you mentioned about a book you're currently trying to.
I'm working on a book called, it's not about ADD, but it sort of is. The title of the book is You're Better Than You Think You Are. And so many people, not just ADD, so many very talented people are better than they think they are. And if they could just awaken to that fact and summon up the energy that is pent up, that they're using to put themselves down, and let it go. It doesn't mean you're being narcissistic. If you marshal all the creative good juice you've got and use it, that's what. So I want to help those people who I begin saying writing this book was like trying to convince someone that it's Sunday when in fact it is Sunday. Convince them what is demonstrably true, that they can't believe, that they're good when in fact they're good, and because if you're feeling good about life and about yourself, you're going to do much better than if you're feeling bad about life and about yourself. You just are, and that's a proven fact. So then the question becomes, how do you get yourself to a place where you do feel good about yourself and about life? And for some people, just a rah-rah talk will do the trick, but usually not for people who are at all intelligent and discerning. So you have to come up with other, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, we look forward to the publishing of that book, and I'm sure our listeners will be looking forward to it as well, to add to their Dr. Hallowell's collection of other books that they've got. If anyone wants to reach out to you, find out more about your amazing work, how can they reach out and connect with you?
Well, you go to my website, drhallowell.com, or you can email me, drhallowell, drhallowell@gmail.com.
And you're on Instagram and other social media platforms as well, aren't you?
It is. I don't do it, so I can't tell you how to get there, but someone does it for me, and I'm told it's pretty good.
Yeah, excellent. And we will add everything in our description, our podcast description. Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure having you and getting your insights into this fascinating topic on ADHD, and just sit down with you, really. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I did too.
Dr. Hallowell, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Archie. Take
care. Nice to see you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.